Well done. Well done. And let's go into the bingo cards. I hope you had fun doing all these bingo squares and meeting people. The winners are Angelina, Sandra, Melanie, and Panela. Well done to all of you. Yes, can we have a big round of applause? Come on, let's hear it for them. Well done. I will go into the IAA booth winners. Let's see who won. Well done to G, Simona, Irina, Alexander, who won gift cards and books. Well done to all of them. Good job. Just a reminder that the books have to be collected at the IAA booth and the gift cards will be emailed to you. And now, there is a special prize, and I've just learned this, so this is extremely exciting. I hope you're going to be as excited as I am. It's all fresh. We have a grand prize coming in, and I'd like you to put your hands together. You will not believe what you're going to see. Please clap together for the grand prize coming in now, please. Yes!
Summer, to my heartbeat sound, we fell in love as the leaves turn brown, and we could be together, baby, as long as skies are blue. You act so innocent now, but you lied so soon.
Thank you very much. So the grand prize is this pen that I was able to finally source at the IAA booth because you were so many to visit the booth, we ran out of swag. So Karine? Karine? Where's Karine? You can, where's Karine? Where is she? You can come collect it after, all right? Thank you. And now, our next guest is a lawyer with extensive experience in financial service laws, focusing on payments and digital assets. He's probably best known as the Whistleblower, who exposed Wirecard, one of Europe's greatest financial scandals, for which he received the 2021 Blueprint for Free Speech Special Recognition Award for integrity and bravery in the public interest, and the 2022 ACFE Cliff Robertson Sentinel Award for publicly disclosing wrongdoing in business or government without regard to personal or business and professional consequences. He will be joined by Emmanuel Johannes for fireside chat, and let's watch a video to better welcome him.
The opening lines of Shakespeare's play Macbeth go fair is foul and foul is fair. And I think that perfectly sums up Wirecard, where whatever was fair was deemed as foul, and where whatever was foul was deemed as fair. A lot has been written about who is the person that really exposed Wirecard, and that person has always been anonymous. There were always good reasons for that, because we were threatened, we were followed, we were intimidated, we were defamed. But I think now it is time to come out and say that I was the one behind exposing this company.
Haben Sie schon mal von Wirecard gehört?
Wirecard. Sie sind Vertreter der neuen Welt der Finanzen und stiegen einst kometenhaft auf.
Mit nur knapp 5.000 Mitarbeitern hat das Unternehmen einen gigantischen Börsenwert geschaffen.
The incredible acceleration in the valuation of your business, it's eye-watering.
If you look over the past 5 years, you're up 3,000%. If you look over the past 15 years, you're up like 40,000%.
Ein Symbol für die neue Ära in der Finanzbranche.
It's an amazing story no one has ever achieved before. A leader in digital payment solutions, Dr. Markus Braun.
Before I talk about digitalization, I just want to say I'm also a pathologic optimist.
Ein bizarrer Bilanzskandal erschüttert den Zahlungsdienstleister Wirecard.
DAX indexed are worth $14 billion just a week ago, now effectively worthless. What a fall from grace.
I can't be believing this. This can't be true. This is simply unbelievable.
The former chief executive of Wirecard, Markus Braun, has been arrested. The move was confirmed earlier this hour by Munich's prosecutor's office and comes in the wake of the growing scandal over a missing 1.9 billion euros at the German payments processor.
Die Affäre Wirecard. Sie nimmt immer wildere Ausmaße an, was die Fluchtgeschichte des Ex-Vorstands Masalek angeht.
Der ist untergetaucht, befindet sich angeblich in Weißrussland. Er hat gute Kontakte zu Geheimdiensten, heißt es.
Der Fall Wirecard zieht Kreise. Er wird auch politisch zusehends brisant.
It's been on everyone's radar for years, but back then, and the Munich prosecutor felt like everything was cool.
Wie kann eine derartig gigantische Hochstapelei so lange gut gehen?
Please welcome to the stage, Pav Gill.
Hey, good morning, everyone. The one thing that I always thought was that if you appear in a movie, they'll make you look good. But I really hope I don't look like that anymore. So, well, thanks everyone for joining this talk, for being here, for listening to me speak, the IIA for inviting me over here. I think a lot of you might be familiar with what happened in Wirecard's case, but perhaps not from my point of view as the person who was there and who came across a lot of the wrongdoing and was pretty much forced into becoming a whistleblower. Something when I was born, when I was in uni, when I am a lawyer, I never ever thought that I'll be. So what happened? I think we can start with who was Wirecard. Like, what did Wirecard do? Wirecard was a payments company to about 20 years in existence until I kind of spoiled that. And they covered the entire payment spectrum. So, issued cards, did payment processing, funnily did fraud and risk management as well, and basically the whole payment spectrum. What's very interesting about Wirecard is the corporate governance aspect, which I've put here. So, for a very long period of time, they had only 3 directors. When I joined, that number became 4. And they also had a supervisory board because it was a listed DAX company, and it was a German company which required a further check and balance, which we can also think about as a supervisory board. Like, did they play a role? What role did they play? In terms of legal and compliance, they had 13 staff. Now, this was at one point a 24 billion euro company as a market cap, but they had 13 legal and compliance staff looking after the whole business from South America to Europe to Asia Pacific, including Australia and New Zealand. And I was part of that 13. So in terms of internal audit, that number goes further down. There were 2.5 staff, half because one was part-time. As you can see, this is extremely lean for a company that was valued so highly that said, it had hundreds of millions of transactions being processed all the time. And in terms of risk, this is very interesting because I actually didn't have much visibility on the risk team. In the recent Munich trial, which is ongoing, one of the risk professionals actually said he was part of legal and compliance. So, we can see that there is some confusion there. What roles did legal and compliance play? How effective was the internal audit function? How effective was the supervisory board? How effective was risk? And as I said, fair is foul and foul is play. Foul is fair. Why did I say that? Why do I say that? It's because whoever in the company tried to raise any red flags, they were deemed as troublemakers. So what was fair was actually being deemed as foul, right? And what was foul, which is how everything was going, was actually deemed as fair, which was the right approach. Everybody keep your head down, continue doing work. Look at our share price, we are just skyrocketing. So how did I end up in the company? Basically, the way Wirecard got into the Asia Pacific region was through a series of 100% M&A acquisitions. That was in Singapore, it was in Malaysia, it was in Indonesia. Very infamously, it was also in India. I think that was about nearly 300 million acquisition for a company that was purchased for 30 million just a couple of weeks before that happened. So they needed someone on the ground. And when I was hired, they said, look, I was hired by the Munich legal team, just to be clear, and they wanted me to be the eyes and ears on the ground. And the way I looked at it was as though, okay, it's a German company. That means it's probably very proper, it's doing things well, it's clearly successful, it's listed, and I'll be given a very wide remit. 11 countries in the Asia Pacific region. They had also recently purchased Citibank's merchant acquiring business. And that required someone on the ground to help them with licensing. What's interesting about that is the fact that it was one of the first few companies to have purchased a huge part of a banking side of merchant acquiring business, but it's not a bank. So it needs to mature to the level of being a bank. And that's why suddenly there were licensing requirements and all these things. So what were the initial red flags? My first day was in the Munich office. So I was flown there, and it's very impressive. You see a big campus, hundreds of employees coming in from the train station, and extremely high security, really high. And I was told that no matter how many times you become a familiar face, you still get stopped at the door and you still get brought to the room and get your passport taken and everything. So I was like, okay, they've got their security in order and all these things. And then very excitedly, I went back to the Singapore office, which is where I was based. And that's a whole different scene. It's not set up the way the European side was. It was very startup-y. Which was good because colleagues were very close. It was not very formal. And then what happened was I was told to get close to this guy called Ido. That's the guy behind Jan Marsalek over there. And who's this mysterious Ido guy who's now on the Interpol list? He was hired by Burkhard Ley at that time, who was the CFO. And what's curious about this is that I was told to get close to him, right? And his role was head of international finance. So everyone in the Asia Pacific office was kind of deferential to him, you know, whether, regardless of seniority, right? You could be an EVP, you could be anybody, but everyone was afraid of this guy in a way because he controlled all of their budgets. So again, from a corporate governance perspective, that was something that was a curiosity. So I got to know Ido, and I did some further checks on him, right? Like, who's this guy? How did he become so powerful? And if you looked at his LinkedIn profile, you would see the first 4 years with an unnamed audit co in Singapore and Hong Kong. And then he ended up in Germany with, I think, Ardent Capital and Rocket Internet as just like a finance manager. So how did he make that leap to head of international finance, you know, handpicked by the board pretty much, and always on a flight, always controlling everyone's finances. So that, and he didn't speak German. He barely could speak English properly, at least based on his emails. and so to me, it's like, wow, how do I become him, right? Like, what magic did he spin? And I got to know him. We did a few flights, and he was always telling me that it's a big mess. There's a lot of things to clean up. There's always cleaning up. What is he cleaning up? I don't know. And he had a very interesting strategy for hiring. So he would hire very relatively inexperienced staff, mostly female, from neighboring countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. And then he would pay them very high salaries. Suddenly he will promote them. And what's interesting about this is I realized eventually it's a form of abuse, because what you're doing is you're taking finance staff, giving them an employment permit in Singapore, which is these days quite difficult to get, and then you're giving them great titles, and because of their inexperience, they'll be forced to rely on what you're saying, right? So that was a strategy that I realized he was adopting as well. What's very curious is when I looked at finances, every company in the Asia-Pacific region was loss-making, like every one of them. But yet, when the EBITDA results are released, it's always the same as Europe. So how is that possible? Like, these were publicly available verifications which could be done. You could go to a company's house, you could extract financials. How did they still end up? And nobody in the company understood that, right? If you spoke to staff, they were like, "Oh wow, where did this money come from? Our technology is not very good. We're still using Excel spreadsheets. Systems hang every now and then. Somehow we're still, rocking it." and so from an on-the-ground perspective, no one understood it, right? And then what happened? We were supposed to be applying for a stored value facility license in Hong Kong as part of the acquisition with Citibank. And we went to Ido and we said that the HKMA requires financials for this company, this entity in the Wirecard group that you're using to apply for a license. It was a dormant entity. And so he gave us a set of financials and we looked at it, and obviously it's loss-making. And we said that this, may not be the entity that we want to use. And then he says, "Don't worry, I'll get back to you." And 2 weeks later, he comes back, and that same dormant entity is now earning money and projecting a very profitable outcome. So that was a real proper red flag, which was then followed by an internal whistleblowing. So I got a call from an internal employee who I called Bobby. It was a female staff. She came to me and she was very scared, saying that Ido, who is a boss, was making her process what's clearly illegal transactions. And I was stunned because this was the first time there was someone that came to me with some evidence and said that. So what did I do? I spoke to her, I gathered evidence. Immediately, I spoke to my supervisors in Munich, and I said, "Look, this is what's happened." They said, "We're coming to Singapore in 2 weeks' time. Just gather as much as you can, blah, blah, blah." And when they came down, we ran through it. eventually they said, let's get a law firm in Singapore to look at this evidence. And why did they say that? Is because they did not want me or any one of themselves to be accused of bias against the finance team, right? They said if we have an objective review by a law firm, then it's independent. It is what it is. Like, people will be forced to act. So that's what happened. And we also got access to inboxes, like raw inboxes of Ido and two of his staff. One was the head of international finance in APAC. The other one was a mysterious guy whose role no one really understood, called James. And going through the inboxes, you would see so many interesting things, which should jump out to anybody, right? Anyone. I'm a legal guy, like, I'm not particularly a finance guy, but I came across, this is just one of many examples. This was an invoice from a company called FlexiFlex that is paying Wirecard, that Wirecard is paying to do 3D tokenization, which is a payments thing. So that's what Wirecard does, 3D tokenization. Why is it paying FlexiFlex that? And if you look at this invoice, FlexiFlex is in Malaysia, but it's invoicing in euros. And anyone that does a Google search on FlexiFlex would realize its name is not FlexiFlex Abrasives, but FlexiFlex Hydraulics. Address is wrong and everything. So again, this jumped out. That's FlexiFlex. That's apparently providing payment services that Wirecard's paying millions for. That's some of its products, in case anyone's interested. And what I've also included is a few more of the transactions. So again, this is round-tripping, right? So Wirecard entities were paying FlexiFlex for consulting, for 3D tokenization. FlexiFlex would take the amount and then round-trip it to another Wirecard entity. That's a Wirecard invoice. I don't know if it looks the same, but it does to me. So again, how did these very obvious things get missed out, right? Whether internally or externally. That's James emailing himself logos. That's a real email. So yeah, I mean, and then, eventually when the FT published their very first article, they did mention FlexiFlex, and a director of FlexiFlex told the FT he had not heard of Wirecard, that his company did not sell software, have Indonesian clients, or even use a payments company. What did the BaFin do on this first article once it came out? It actually went out of its way to pretty much exonerate Wirecard, which to me was an unusual step by a regulator, because it's a reputable newspaper. It's saying something about one of your listed companies. What I would have expected a regulator to do would say that we understand certain allegations have been made. We are looking into it, but until then, we have no further comment. But they took the next step, which is said this is most likely, we understand, to be a short seller attack. So just circling back to Project Tiger findings, what's very interesting is just anyone that reads the conclusion from the law firm, I think for IA purposes, the second paragraph over there might be very useful, because it says documentary evidence independently corroborates Bobby's disclosures. The manner in which the documents and agreements were created and falsified raised very serious concerns. And then the last paragraph says it's not difficult to verify at first instance with various third parties like FlexiFlex purportedly involved whether the commercial relationships existed in the first place. So this report came out, the board found out about it, the board was very upset. They were like, who's this PAF guy? Why? And Jan Marsalek was angry. He was like, Asia is my baby. I created that whole place. How come I didn't know about it? What would you have expected the board to do? Well, this is what they did. They told me to stand down. They wanted to be the ones investigating, which I raised the concern didn't make any sense because you can't have persons of interest investigate themselves. That actually upset them even more, even though I tried to be as diplomatic as possible, which is always a personal challenge. And they then decided, okay, should we change the law firm? It doesn't make sense, appears dodgy if we do so. So they said we will use Raja & Tan, the law firm, as a gap analysis. So we'll make sure that the law firm can now look at all our flaws, pick them out, and then we go try to fix them. And one of the other additional ways is they created what was an anonymous whistleblowing channel. So when I saw that, I asked the question, who does this anonymous channel go to? Apparently it went straight to Jan Marsalek. So that's very scary if you sit back and think about it from an internal process point of view. And again, IA comes into this in terms of testing. If you have got a whistleblowing process in place, how independent is it? Have you tested it? Do your employees trust that the process is safe, is confidential, it's secure? Because otherwise, in like this very example, you can have a legitimate tool being abused to weed out those with information and fire them. That's what Wirecard did. So for 3 months, they created all kinds of ways they were figuring out. I think their biggest challenge was, I was their head of legal for Asia Pacific. So how do we get rid of this guy, right? Who's got all this info? He's got the inboxes. He's the one that brought the law firm in, and yeah, they tried everything. HR-related issues, looking at your work. So from being one of the fastest promoted employees, I was suddenly being questioned work-wise. And then they decided to try to kill me. And how did they do that? So once all these other things failed, they said, we really need you to go to Jakarta. I was like, why? There's a rebranding exercise. I was like, I know, I was the one that gave you the 2 law firms that can do that rebranding exercise. They're like, no, you have to go, whether it's in 2 weeks, in 2 months, in 2 days, but you have to go. So then Edo comes about again. And I just want to make clear, throughout this 3-month process, not a single one of them was suspended for even 1 day. They were informed that there was an investigation against them. They got empowered because nothing was being done. And Edo came about, and he reminded me. He said, you do know that Wirecard's been known to make troublemakers disappear, right? So, and then he also reminded me who his father-in-law was, and this he loves to remind everyone. So apparently Edo, his father-in-law is a drug dealer in Jakarta. And I actually knew that from the start, which was one of the red flags, because why is a payments company employing pretty much a CFO type person who's directly linked to the underworld, right? So again, what's going on? Where's the KYC? Where's the DD? Where's anything? And then I got 2 tip-off calls from Munich saying, we understand you're being told to go on a trip to Jakarta. We would recommend that you don't because it's a one-way ticket, and then they just hang up. So I told my mom, funnily, and she's like, I'm going to take your passport and you're not going anywhere. And I told her, you do know that's illegal, right? Yeah, I didn't go, and in the end, because I didn't go the following week, they forced me to resign. And it didn't stop there. So how did the whistleblowing happen? Why did someone who was trying to do his job end up as a whistleblower, right? I left the company, and I thought, that's it, happy days, bye, enjoy your fraud. But they didn't stop. They sent people to follow me and my mom. They created interviews knowing that I needed a job, but it was friendly companies that would interview me. The whole interview is asking me why I left Wirecard, not about how's your attention to detail, right? None of those interview questions. And then I realized why they were doing that is because they wanted me to trip up, say something wrong, then you can cause the chaos in a person's life by saying you breached the NDA, you breached a settlement agreement, whatever, right? My mom got upset again, and she decided she will reach out to Claire Rewcastle-Brown, who was the journalist behind 1MDB, the Malaysian government scandal. And Claire referred us to the FT, saying she understands the FT has been following this for a few years and getting nowhere. So we met the FT. I was actually told by my mom that we are meeting the FT because I was busy finding another job, not whistleblowing. And I said, why? Why are you doing? Like, this is so crazy, right? But we met the FT and we gave them, and it took 4 months for them to come up with that first FT article that you saw there. What, again, I didn't expect was the FT to have an impact and then get neutralized because of the protectionism that was in place. So why do I say UK versus Germany? Because at some point I realized that Germany was viewing this from a very, I think, Brexit-influenced perspective, saying that we've got a UK newspaper that's jealous of our fintech darling. It's attacking us. This is a short seller thing. So then I realized I need to work from within the company. I need to work from within the country, and I need to change that perception. So I reached out to Süddeutsche Zeitung, and then they started publishing. I also created a very infamous Twitter profile, which I don't want to go back in time and read because I said a lot of nasty things. But I think one day I will. And I started posting things which, newspapers didn't want to post for a variety of reasons, right? Legal and so forth. And that got a lot of attention. Wirecard had a very sophisticated Twitter army, thousands of bots that would attack you every time you say something wrong. But I didn't care. I just kept posting and posting and posting. Eventually, that got the attention of hedge funds, pretty powerful ones. And they forced, I think, the supervisory board and gave a lot of pressure to Marcus Braun. And eventually, the KPMG audit was undertaken. Again, time went by. It was 1.5 years. And from my perspective, you're sitting down saying, I'm fighting everybody, and nothing's happening, right? The FT's been neutralized. German papers are getting sued. But questions are being raised. Now, will KPMG be able to find something? And I think, thank goodness, eventually they did, and EY couldn't sign off, and 1.9 billion euros was missing. I remember that day very well. It was so exciting, right? Like waiting for election results. And you're just sitting down there, and the share price is hovering around 100 euros. So either it's going to smash up or it's going to just crash. And there were delays and delays. And what happened? They couldn't fraud anymore. They couldn't forge anymore. And, it's one of those curious things. How could external auditors not know or even check with, for example, the Singapore bank or the Filipino bank where the 1.9 billion euros actually existed in there? So yeah, all the movie stuff happened after that with the arrests and everything. Marcus Braun said he's a victim. I think he's still saying he's a victim. And yeah, that's where we are today. And the EU decided they'll come up with a whistleblowing directive that's now in place in 22 member states. I think by the end of this year, all affected companies would have to comply in some fashion with that. Questions are, how effective is the directive going to be? That remains to be seen. Would employees still trust? If you're a genuine whistleblower, like in a position like I was, would you trust internal processes? Would you prefer going externally? Why are whistleblowers stigmatized is something I also never really understood. I understand it from a cultural perspective that you don't rat, you don't snitch and stuff. But why is it that if someone in the street saw a robbery taking place, someone's bag being snatched, and he ran, like if I ran there and I smacked the guy and saved the day, I was hailed as a hero, right? But then why is it that when it's in a corporate setting, you are not. Even though you're exposing a crime, why is that kind of exposure of a crime not viewed the same way as stopping another crime in the street? Right? Why do we have this stigma? Also, as control functions, legal, compliance, internal audit, why is it that if this were a aeroplane company, that these people would be viewed as safety officers, and everyone would be like, yes, we have to be safe, we have to make sure that all the stuff is done properly. But then what happens in a FI? What happens in an environmental code? Why are those same aspects having double standards, right? Don't you want your company to be run in a safe and sound way? Don't you want... It's not always the case that, okay, just...
So, but what surprises me also, it's not all about internal auditors. There was external auditors as well. There was regulators. You are a lawyer, you're not even an accountant, but you could tie things together and feel like something is not right.
Yeah.
So do you think it's just a matter of, competence or something else?